Welcome to For the Love of Rugby.
We've been basking in the glory of a Lions Test Series win for the past couple of days, so how good's that?
Yeah, mate, I've got to admit, I'm still on cloud nine.
Before we get into today's episode, if any of the viewers can click the like and subscribe button, we're trying to get 50,000 subscribers before the end of the series.
But our main man, Anthony Watson, is here. He's obviously been our man on the ground out in Australia, and we get to relive it all over again with him.
Yes, lads, it was an unbelievable day at the MCG yesterday. I was fortunate enough to go there for the AFL game on Thursday, but the Lions' victory there on Saturday was an absolute different level. Like, mate, unbelievable. And now I get to relive it all with the two masters of the game, you two. So I'm buzzing for this.
You sound a little bit croaky. You've been singing those chants.
I'd love to blame it on the chants, but as you two know me very well, my singing voice is awful and I'm not the one to get the crowd going at the best of times. So unfortunately, I think that's to do with the 45 tequila ginger ales I had last night.
Full flow celebrations, Ant. What's the, did we get the Ugo Monya, what's that coming over the hill? Did we get that chant taken off this week? Did anyone catch on to it?
Unfortunately not. He had a new one this week. I've got no idea what it was. I can't even give you a rendition. But mate, every week there's a new song. Ben Kay had one about Andrew Porter this week. So I'm not sure any of them will really catch on, but the Ugo Monya one was my favourite. The Quins fans need to get behind that. That's an all-time classic.
There was a new one in the stadium, but we couldn't hear who it was about.
Yeah, was there a new one?
I don't know if you two are trying to stitch me up here.
No, genuinely.
Don't know what stadium that was in, mate, but I didn't hear it.
I thought there was a new chant going around. Maybe there wasn't.
I was probably tucking into my foie gras just before kickoff, mate, so I wasn't able to get to hear that one.
We have had hundreds of comments, as you can imagine, after the game. And my favourite one so far, by the way, is it was such a good game. Coley, if you look really closely, is almost smiling.
Round of applause for that one. We got a smile out of Coley.
The guy was on an emotional come down. He was buzzing.
I know.
and then he was on the slopes down after the game.
The adrenaline dump, mate. I feel like I played a test match.
If you haven't seen our initial thoughts straight after the game, you can still check that out on audio and on YouTube. But right, let's talk about the dramatic final and those closing moments. Where does Keenan's try compare with other series wins, do you reckon, lads?
Well, in 2013, there wasn't really because Lions won that final test against Australia fairly decisively, so there wasn't one there. You think about 27, I guess, the iconic moment of drawing the test, the non-knock-on call, non-offside call. Then, you could talk about 97 Lions, the Guscott drop goal, when the 76th minute was it in the second test. That's probably a fairly iconic moment for the Lions winning anyway. So it's probably up there with that, isn't it? Is it up there with that?
I think so, mate. To go to claw back an 18-point deficit and score in the last minute, essentially, of the second series. The only thing that could have made it better is if it was the deciding test, I think. But look, I think it's definitely up there. I think the only one that rivals it is Guscott. It has to. Because his was a drop goal, this was a try. Everyone's in for a try. Last minute, the ball just has to get kicked one more time and it's the end of the game. So I think that this is top two 100%.
Yeah, I reckon it's the manner of it, isn't it? Like Australia trying to hold on, Lions having the ambition to keep moving the ball and try and move the ball to space and keep building the phases rather than, let's say, as I mentioned when I did my review straight after, is rather than trying to set up or eke out a penalty or play really tight, they're still shifting the ball, like Blair Kinghorn taking the far edge, Tyg Byrne hitting a hard line, but cutting out 5-6 defenders, Tommy Freeman doing a little pick through the ruck. They were sniffing for an opportunity to score a try. Like they were still playing with great vision and broadness in how they played. They didn't tighten up at all. And I think that's what it was. It was sort of this, and then just to finish it like they did. And then you had the whole sort of Aussie's going to hold out, are they not? And then to Keenan's crash over like that. I think it's got to be sort of on par with the 97 drop goal. But I think because it literally was the final act, it just added to the drama, didn't it? It was just immense.
Yeah, I think as well, even if there hadn't been that suspense of waiting for that high tackle and all that stuff as well, it would have got even wilder, because that takes a bit of a lull out of it and then it comes back up. If it had just been clean cut, that's it, I think the boys would have gone even wilder, the fans would have gone even wilder. It would have been insane.
Yeah, I think like part of me thinks 97's iconic because you're playing against Africa and they're the world champions at the time. They're probably a better side. But then part of me thinks like in 2, 3, 8 years' time, no one cares how good the sides were going into the game, if you see what I mean. Like, it's only when you really delve into it. Like, I would say this Australia team's not as good as that 97 South Africa team as an opposition. But then I think in like 2, 3, however many years' time, no one's going to care. Like, similar to like 2013 when we were playing Australia. And it's kind of like, it wasn't an iconic Aussie team. We beat them and sort of beat them in that third test, but actually give it a bit more time. And you're like, no, it's a Lions series victory. It counts. You know what I mean? It doesn't really matter the quality of opposition. It's more about the style in which they win. And I think that, I think Keenan's try definitely, the fact it's a final play or final minute of a test match, Lions have clawed their way back into it. No matter what's happened the week before, Australia played incredibly well. So I think, it's definitely one of the, probably up there with Guscott's iconic Lions moments. And the fact that it's modern day as opposed to 30 years ago, it makes a massive difference.
And these moments are pure drama. They don't actually happen that often. Like, you see match-winning sort of penalties. You see teams banging at the door and not necessarily getting over the line. So it's quite a rarity. And I'm thinking like, when have we sort of had situations like this? I'm thinking, there's a Johnny Sexton great drop goal, wasn't there, against France, I think in the Six Nations opening round, like right at the death. You're thinking, love to bring him up, Burnsy with a drop goal to win the Prem right at the death. Lions is slightly higher, but I just got to get him in there. And then you start thinking of like, how many phases Ireland had against New Zealand, obviously trying to break them down in the quarter final and weren't able to do it. France couldn't come up, with a miracle play against South Africa in the quarter final of these are both in 23. England, when we lost against South Africa in the semi-final, the Pollard penalty. In modern rugby, it's actually quite rare that a try is scored right at the death in the magnitude of a test series of a game like that in a huge atmosphere, occasion, everything that goes with it. Like, it doesn't happen too often. So when it does, the excitement is just on a different level.
Without a doubt. I think Coley's bang on with, people will reflect on this in probably 10, 15 years, I reckon, as a massively, that will reflect on that moment even as an iconic moment. Like, everyone remembers where you were when XYZ happened. People remember where they were when Keenan scores to win the series. I think that comes with time as well. Do you know what I mean? It becomes, the longer it goes, people will just relive that moment. Whereas in the here and now, it might not, people are trying to compare it to XYZ, but then I think when we reflect on it in 10 years, people will probably have it, or some people will have it as number one.
Mate, when he scored, I was going bonkers at home. Like, I'm up on the sofa, I'm going mad. The kids are all sort of looking at me like I'm insane. What was the moment like in the stadium? Because it must have been off the chart.
Mate, the whole atmosphere was unbelievable. Like, I've done some solid sporting experiences. Wimbledon, obviously had the privilege of playing in the World Cup final, Champions League final, stuff like that. But the entrance to that game was like nothing I'd experienced. The Wallabies were all up for it. All the fans were like behind the team totally differently to last week. The fans were, I remember bumping into a fan last week who was basically like showing up to watch the Wallabies lose in Brisbane. And I was like, well, that's not ideal, is it? But this week it just felt like they had some grit and some grunt. And I think that kind of energy infiltrated the team. And you saw it with the way they started. But in terms of, the last passage of play, it was so loud in there. And there's a bit of, sometimes those stadiums where there's a bit of gap between the players and the stand, it kind of sometimes takes away the bit of the atmosphere. Did not feel like that at all. It was rocking in there. And then when he scored, it was as loud as I've ever heard a stadium in my life. It was bonkers. And then with all the stuff with the TMO, there was boos, there was cheer. It was off the charts.
unbelievable. What was the split between Australian and Lions fans, and if you were to guess?
Honestly, I reckon it was as close to 50-50 as I've experienced. I think the Lions fans were louder, and I'm basing that off one moment of the game where the PA or whatever you want to call it started to try and get a Wallabies chant going, and it was like, go on the Wallabies, and then he tried to keep getting them going, and they just got drowned out by the Lions fans after about 10 seconds. But they were still going for it, and yeah, I reckon 50-50 is probably a fair summation. But you know what? So you get 40,000 Lions fans who have travelled halfway across the world. They're not going to get outsung in someone else's stadium, regardless of where it is.
Even watching on telly, mate, and like TV never really does it justice in terms of the noise. But when Tom Wright scored that try, when they went back-to-back scores, Australia received the kickoff. Jorgensen went up the right touchline. They then came back in the field. Lovely little tight connected passes out the back. Suaalii, mate, off the left foot, clean through, hits right. I was like, wow. Like, because it's a crap, like, that's a hell of a try. Like, Aussies, I can be quick to be harsh on the Aussies, right? But I can't applaud them enough. I thought they were magnificent yesterday in so many areas. But that try was a special try. And in the background, and then coming through the TV, the noise, and you could see all the Aussie flags, and you could see everyone standing up on their feet. Like, at that point, I'm thinking Lions are up against this. Was there a bit of a shell shock amongst the fans at that point as well?
Oh, 100%. I think that the contrast in the two games with the starts kind of dictated the atmosphere for the rest of the game, because the week before, obviously, Tyg Burn wins a penalty, Lions are 3-0 up, and they kind of roll with it from there, and that just sucked all the energy out of the fans. Whereas this week, it was like, this is a do-or-die game, so we already need to be behind our team. And then you add to the fact there was a bit of niggle, there was a bit of, Australia obviously started much better, much more physical, and that just meant that when they went up 18 points, it was like, oh wow, like, they're here to play. This is not a joke now. And there was definitely a bit of like, the Lions' energy was low at that point, and it was like backs against the wall for a little bit. So it was an unbelievable game to be at. I'm so happy and lucky that I was able to experience it live, because it was so topsy-turvy, emotions in, out. And then to see the boys do it how they did it was unreal, mate.
Kind of adds to the drama, I reckon. Like, you're at the MCG, you got 90-odd thousand there. Like, try at the death. Australia playing like far beyond anything we've seen leading up to it. Like, having a hell of a game, pushing Lions all the way. Lions having to come back, do it the hard way. Those 2 tries before half-time were so critical for the Lions. But just the whole experience to it adds to it. You think, what a special game we have in rugby, like how unique the Lions is, and like the MCG and everything that goes with it, and the drama that we got. I like, from a fan's point of view, I was just so happy that it lived up to the hype that we wanted to. When we sat down this time last week, weren't we? We were all a bit, just wasn't quite, there wasn't the jeopardy, it wasn't this. It had everything. And as you say, like, it was to be there and like to be part of that, to witness it firsthand, be part of that stadium. As you say, like, people always go, oh, where were you when Keenan scored? Where were you for that second test? Like, you were in amongst it. Like,
you said it was rocking, and 90,000 people fully engaged, and something they'll never forget. And where were you when he scored? And I was there. You also sent us a video of a fan sleeping.
Mate, I want to say that it was the jet lag that was hitting him, because I watched him for a good 5 minutes in between plays, and he was fighting for his life to keep his eyes open, and he just caved, mate, and that was it. Anytime there was the whistle blew or there was a cheer, he was like... Then as soon as there's 2-3 phases...
Back to sleep.
The slow fall of the head. Honestly, he was goners, mate. I want to say it was the jet lag, but it could well have been the 30 pints he had before that. I'm not sure, and who am I to judge, mate? He
must have been like the people at the Lions Den last week, and you met at about 3 o'clock and you said they were absolutely well on the way. Maybe the bloke just got totally carried away in amongst it with the fans again. Got absolutely battered, and the time the game comes around, just can hardly keep his eyes open. Like, what a shame.
Just didn't have a
if
scrum
it's jet
out
lag,
this week.
you kind of forgive him. But if it's just through like just getting carried away, you're like, oh my gosh, what were you doing? He'll get home to his wife, and they'll be like, how was it? He'll be like, oh, it was an amazing experience. So you enjoy it all? I did. I mean, I might have fallen asleep during the final play of the game, but
No,
yeah,
he won't admit it, mate.
The
He won't
noise was
admit
so
it,
good
then
it
it'd be
woke me up.
It'd just be a viral video of him sleeping, and it'd be like, "Is this you?" It's like,
It's going to go as viral as the couple at the Coldplay concert. Yeah. And Hugo Keenan, is he underappreciated?
Underappreciated. Do you know what I feel like he's like? I feel like he's one of those guys who, when you train with and see up close, you realise how good they really are. I don't know because I've not done that, but I get that vibe off him with the way he goes about his business. He's doesn't make too many mistakes, always solid. I wouldn't say he's like if we put him up against Tom Wright on the other side of the field, Tom Wright is an X-Factor player. I wouldn't say Hugo Keenan is an X-Factor, out-and-out X-Factor. He's got that bit about him, obviously, but I think he's in the team and Andy Farrell loves him so much as that rock at the back because he doesn't make mistakes, because he works so hard covering the backfield, because he's tactically astute with his kicking and coverage and stuff like that. I think that those are skills that are underappreciated by the casual fan in a respectful way, I guess. But I think when you are training with people like that and you see how they get you out of trouble, I think you get to appreciate them more. So I think if you asked anyone who's played with him week in, week out for Leinster or Ireland, they would say, no, we appreciate him so much. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? I just think he's one of those guys.
Sometimes for the casual fan, like you say, Ant, people just doing their job is underappreciated. Someone just being incredibly consistently solid in what they do is underappreciated. Like James Ryan, for instance, he played on Tuesday and me and Coley gave him big raps after. And we've always been a big fan of him because we see the bits that maybe the casual fan wouldn't, in terms of him emptying rucks, like banging people on the gain line, like doing the mauling and brawling stuff, having to carry when he needs to, but not necessarily being a big part of his game. But when he needs to, he comes with some massive carries. So sometimes for the casual fan, it's like they don't necessarily, because they don't see the glittery bits, they don't really always value what they do. But I think being pros ourselves or ex-pros, that those people are in your team are so vital because they make everyone else look better around them, because they almost cover the tracks for everyone else. Like Keenan in the backfield, James Ryan hitting rucks. These people almost cover up for not cover up, but they do the nitty gritty bit so the other people can bring the stardust. But without them, the other team, the other sort of teammates can't bring those other bits.
Yeah, it's the not sexy stuff, isn't it? It's like, I'd probably put Brad Barrett in a similar, he's a player that kind of comes to mind when you talk about someone who's underappreciated, because he got through all the hard grunt that not too many of the other backs, me included, really wanted to get stuck into. But, if you could pick someone to be in your team, he'll be up there because he's happy to go about his business like that, So, yeah, mate, you're bang on with your explanation, 100%, Len.
I think as well, fullback's one of those positions where you almost remember, say if oppositions are kicking 50-22s and it's a massive swing in the game because the fullback's out of position, you kind of remember that. But when the fullback just does his job and collects the ball and bangs down the other end of the field, or, it's solid under a high ball, it doesn't have to be spectacular, but they're kind of, it's just because it's just your job. It's actually vital to the team because it's sort of like you're playing. I think Keenan's one of those blokes that probably has a real high floor in his game, if you know what I mean. His ceiling might not be, he's going to score from 90 metres and he's this really explosive fullback, but the fact that he's so solid and just a good footballer and can bring other people into the game, it allows other people to have the X factor around him, whereas he's just a good footballer, knows his stuff. He's not going to get caught out too often in the backfield and all the rest of it. So therefore, you can build upon that, especially having a fullback that is just solid, you rely upon. He's not flaky as anything. He brings a security to the team to be able to do the rest of its job, if you see what I mean. Definitely. And you're right, especially talking about fullbacks, because the TV coverage, the way it is, you won't even see half the work he does because it's obviously on the opposition when they're kicking the ball. So Keenan's actually might have worked 45 metres from the other side of the pitch to catch a kick on the other side, but you don't see it because the TV coverage is obviously where the ball is. So yeah, that kind of, I guess, not shown work then becomes underappreciated because you don't see it. Because it's not a spectacular catch, like I say. Sometimes if he'd be late to run across the field and sliding in and catching it, you're like, oh my God, that's great skills. That's, brilliant. But it's if he's already there under the ball, he's already worked hard where the TV camera's not on him. He's worked under the ball, it kicks to him, he catches it, and he's just stood there. You're like, yeah, that's nothing. But actually, we haven't seen the work that goes into it. I think that's, people that are listening and watching. It's sometimes if you're at a live game, just watch what the fullback and the back three are doing off the ball. And sometimes, like, it's amazing how guys run the communication, the knowledge of, like, remember when George Ford played Australia? I know he's fly half, but when George Ford played Argentina at first test, like, I know he's fly half, so it's a bit different, but he's in the backfield, and it's that ability to work, run, move the opposition around, kick, run, bring other people into the game, like, and that's where fullbacks, I think, are underappreciated, and good ones almost. You only sometimes realise a fullback when they make a mistake rather than excelling, you know what I mean? And having a good, solid fullback, everyone loves one. Everyone wants one in their team that just doesn't make mistakes, is mistake-free. But because it's not sexy, it goes underappreciated.
Never underestimate these incredible players that took the field yesterday of just doing your job consistently. Like, never underestimate how important that is, and never devalue them. I've got to credit the Lions attack, the cohesion. Like, there was a lot of chat about the shape, being the Irish system and how hard that is to learn. And they've had to fast track that. But I really want to say, like, yes, some of the plays are instinctive. Some of them are shape driven. But to actually get an attack going is the hardest part of the game. And I think the Lions, a huge amount of credit has to go to all the players involved, the coaching staff involved, to get them to the point of where they are. Because it's really impressive. And, you look at some of the tries that they have scored on tour, but particularly some of them yesterday, like, without that cohesion, without some of that shapes, they don't necessarily happen.
Yeah, I think that if you look at 3 of the tries in particular, Len, they might have got into the position with brilliant shape, but I wouldn't say it was like a dominant facet of the game. Like, they actually, for me, looking at it from the outside, it looked like players were given the freedom and the ability to make decisions based on what they saw. Like, for example, you just mentioned there about, Jamison Gibson Park setting up Tom Curry's try. You see someone on the short side and he's gone. That's not a structured phase play, is it? Then you look at, James Lowe, where he's flicked it out the back to Tyg Byrne to go in. That's also probably not structured phase play. Like, they've taken an edge there, and James Lowe's created a bit of magic, Tyg Byrne under the sticks. And then even the try at the end, they're numbered up. The Wallabies are numbered up. Yes, they've got a big edge, but they're numbered up, and Finn's just carried on flicking it around the back and then given Hugo Keenan a 2-on-2 on the edge. I wouldn't say that, those 3 have come from ridiculous phase attack, but what they've come from is the freedom. This is what it looks like to me anyway, the freedom for guys to go out there and really just express themselves and showcase what they're about.
Yeah, freedom and some cohesion as well. And I want to pick up on that Curry's try, if I can, just quickly. And I encourage people to have a look at it. Have a look at the try and why and how it's created, and how every decision you make in defence is a cue for an attacker to make great decisions. So Lions aren't really going anywhere. Gibson Park hits up the runner. He carries. Right, they lock down that breakdown. Tom Wright is the first defender on the same way. So Tom Wright's there, then it's got Liner, then it's got Jorgensen. It's a 3v3 in theory. Tom Wright then decides to try and counter-ruck, which means he engages in that ruck, which then means the space from the ruck to the first defender is then Tom Liner, which is like, I don't know, maybe sort of 4 or 5 metres. That allows Gibson Park then straight away, he recognised Tom Wright's hit the breakdown, like tried to counter-ruck, he doesn't need to do it. He recognised then he can get inside shoulder of Tom Liner. So straight away, like I say, every decision you make in defence then is a cue for an attacker. He engages. Gibson Park picks up the ball. He goes inside shoulder at Tom Liner. He has to jam in on him. So what I mean is he has to turn in and take Gibson Park. If he doesn't, Gibson Park shows and goes and scores. Tom Liner comes in. He then picks him off with a pass. The next defender, Jorgensen, has to come in and hit the next attacker, and then he gets it away to Tom Curry. So what in theory was a 3v3 and never going to take the opportunity quickly becomes a 3v2 in a blink of an eye because of a decision of someone to hit that breakdown. And I think, I encourage people to watch it because these are the tiny decisions and margins that are made in a second. And I don't think people really appreciate how that works. But just watch that one try and just after what I've just said, and you'll see it for yourself. Like, he engages the ruck, space gets wider, Gibson Park engages, he has to come in, picks him off, next one has to come in, he has to follow in, picks him off, Curry scores. It's just really, really, it looks simple, but it isn't. There's so many quick decisions made on the back of defence giving cues to attack.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Len, because I'll never forget early on in my career, Andy Farrell, as the defence coach for England, always told me on a short side to never counter-ruck last minute, but for this very reason, because you can't pick up the numbers then. you've got 3 set, and then suddenly you've got 2. You can't adjust in time, and when you've got a smart 9 like Jameson Gibson Park, it's too late. So it's funny that they've exploited that in, like you said, in that minute millisecond, because it's tough.
Tone, how often were you counter-rucking breakdowns on short sides?
Well, it might not have been me in particular.
Big issue in your game, counter-rucking breakdowns.
I've told you this story, Coley. I've jackled and competed in 2 breakdowns in my career. One ended up in the splits, and the other one resulted in me going off injured. So I learnt very early on, Andy Farrell, you're a smart man. I will not get involved in any breakdowns.
I'd tell you one thing though, just on that, obviously on that try, and then you look at the long pass to James Lowe. Again, it's a 2v2, but he stands him up, takes Lenny Katalbi outside. Great fend, which is a bit of X factor, is his right fend. Out the back door, Ty Burns scores. From an Australia's point of view, and I absolutely commend all the tries line score, but from Australia's point of view, that is the one thing that you're looking at and going, like, we had to bar up better than what we did. Like, at times, you look at some of those tries. I say, the decision on that one for the Curry, the decision on the Low with the offload at the back.
But even Hugh Jones's try, like, you look at, I think it is, who's the boat came off the bench? McDermott. I think it's McDermott hits him second man. And he kind of like just bounces off him. It's like, you've got to like hit the ball, stick on it, and hopefully land underneath it as he carries you over the line. You know what I mean? You can't hit him bounce off. Even Ty Burns, I think he goes over 2 Lions defenders. You're a bit like, if you're Australia, like, without being too negative, it's like your goal line, the line series, you've got to defend that yard. And the moments though in the first half and stuff, they really did. But I think Australia will be a bit frustrated. They let the Lions almost into the 5 metre line so easily, especially into that sort of first half, I'm going to say. But especially those 1-on-1 tackles or 2-on-1 tackles around the goal line, you can't just get bounced off and let someone score. And that's not taking anything away from the Lions, but I think any defensive team will be frustrated with some of that application, because all it takes is one of them to be stopped and you win you're back in the series. So without being too negative, you'd probably be looking at that as Australia and be frustrated in the fact that all we needed was one of those to come off. And I know you talk about, I think Joe Smith this morning has been sort of saying about how, or Joe Smith after the game's like, it's a penalty, that kind of stuff. But the test never really comes down to, everyone says it will come down to that moment, like the Morgan clear out. But actually, there's 100 other opportunities in the game, like Australia missing touch or alpha penalty, or let's say those goal line stands and just being better organised, not counter-rucking a breakdown. There's so many of those in the game. Everyone talk about one moment, but you watch the game back and you're like, there's 12, 15 moments where if you just do something slightly different, the Lions don't score. And then you win, you know what I mean? And that's the kind of bit of, I guess, as professional rugby players, you go back and analyse, whereas that will just get washed over in the fact that end of the game, one thing happened.
Definitely, mate. That try, Ty Burns, mate, is, like you said, we're not taking anything away from the Lions here, but you cannot have a back rower that close to the edge and have 3 defenders and he gets in. And it wasn't like he was flirting with the touchline either. Like, he has to be buried into touch there. You've essentially got 4 defenders. You've got the 3 Wallabies and you've got the touchline. And yeah, for me, that was a big indicator of where the game was won and lost. I thought that, yes, obviously you could talk about the incident like you said, but the missed touch, I thought Australia overplayed way too much, which played into the Lions' hands in the second half, not getting out of their half. And then some of their edge defence was very leaky. And, you go 18 points up, you just take care of those 3 things and it becomes a different game, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You say you can look at the isolated moment, but as we mentioned there, just some of their defensive work for those tries, if you're Australia, for all the brilliant things they did. And we've all been complimentary of them because they were terrific in many ways. But I tell you what, that's the first thing you'll be reviewing and going, lads, we've got to do better than what we did, because it was too often, wasn't it? And then even you say, and back into the game, you're missing touch. Even the maul towards the end, everyone forgets about that. Marrow getting in there. I think Ty Burn was in there. They were able to hold up the maul, weren't they? So it was a scrum down, turnover, then Stewie went to change his boots. But all those moments of not getting out your half is key. And I think all said and done, that's where Australia probably missed a little bit of nous in your 9 and 10 and those decision-making guys that go, right, how do we manage this next 10 minutes to make sure that we see it out? And I think they just kind of kept inviting or left the door open for the Lions, and then the Lions were good enough to take it. Right, Ant, I've got a question from Josie, though. Please, can we get Anthony Watson's take on Sheehan's try? As a winger, he must have practiced diving under and over people so often.
Yeah, I never practiced diving over someone head on, I'll tell you that. I think that, look, fair play to him. I think that I actually had a really, really long chat about this with Ugo earlier, because a letter of the law is a try, but they've got to create some changes around that, because you can't be just picking and going and jumping over people. Like, it's mental. You know, like I said, I have all the respect in the world for Danshi, and even just to have the nuts to try it and it come off. But I think that there's got to be some nuances changed around that rule. I think it's designed for, you know, I think the actual ruling says that you can dive in the act of scoring a try or attempting to score a try, but you're not supposed to jump to avoid a tackle. But you've kind of done both in one. Do you know what I mean? So I think that the rule is actually there to, like, as if someone's coming across the pitch and you're diving to score the try, as opposed to picking and going 5 meters out. But I can see Coley trying to emulate that. I reckon that you had that in your locker back in the day, Coley. No,
Tone. The Operation Human Shield of tapping and going into a brick wall. By the time I bent over and tapped the ball and picked it up, the defenders have got off the line and melted me. So yeah, that's not my. It was always like, who's the thickest in the pack?
Head, Coley, you'd have been banged.
Oh, exactly. It's like, who's the thickest in the pack? Oh, often the hooker, mate. You just tap and go into. You see those 5 bodies that are all like frothing at the mouth, lined up straight against you. Yeah. You run headfirst into that. It was funny because the play before that, I think Sheehan takes like a dive, which I think is a quick play to kind of get a quick ruck to go, but he almost like goes forward 2 yards and just goes at the floor. Then almost like, because of that, I think the next one works so well, because Australia like, oh, he's just going to dive at the floor. So they've gone really low and he's gone over the top. But yeah, it's a bit of a grey area, because it's a bit like, if there's Australian, say, stood behind the tackle that melts him in the air, is he then penalised for jumping over a tackle? You know what I mean? So it's almost so outcome based in what the referee's interpretation is, which is fair enough, the referee's interpretation, but like, it's kind of like, if he doesn't score and he falls half a yard short, but then he places the ball, is that active scoring? I don't know. It's a bit of a grey area, and it'll be interesting to see this year because now teams can do a dive over the top. You've seen it once. It's like, now we're going to get to the goal line stand where, you know, hookers traditionally tap and go. It's like, we're going to get people just jumping over the top of, or diving, not jumping, diving over the top, and say it's the act of scoring. It's going to be interesting what sort of World Rugby do about that.
It's going to be like the tush push, mate, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Exactly.
I think it was extremely clever of him. And you look at what Razzie does and what he's been experimenting with the rules and things like that. Like, you saw a loophole. Like, first one he dived and they're all coming. Like, often that first collision, everyone's diving at your shins, your ankles, like it's a hell of a collision. I thought he saw a loophole. He did it. He absolutely executed. Class. The rules will probably change now that first collision can't be a dive, because that makes sense. But whilst he got the loophole, he used it, exploited it, and he absolutely nailed it. But it wouldn't surprise me moving forward. As you say, guys, first ruck, you can't do that.
I think they should bring back all 5 yard tap and goes should have to be the wall. You should have to turn your back and do the wall and shuffle it between like 3 blokes, turn the back, shuffle it around, and send like runners through the holes. That should just be the law now. You can only tap and go in the 5 metre line with the wall.
Well, they can't get rid of the diving for the act of scoring, though, for wingers and everything like that, but they probably get rid of it off tap penalties. You can't dive on first collision. It's like you can't take a drop goal, can you?
Johnny May was Italy in COVID, jumped over the top of a tackler to score, didn't he?
Yeah,
he did.
I think that the difference is that he's coming from the side. If someone is directly in front of you and you jump over the top of them, I think it's a bit different to them cover tackling across to jump and finish. But look, I don't want to get it twisted. I'm not taking anything away from him. Even to have the athleticism to jump from 4 meters out over the top of 2 diving players and score a try is ridiculous for anyone, let alone a hooker. Like, I saw his stats the other day about how many tries he scored for Leinster, Ireland, and now the Lions. And mate, the guy is an absolute machine. So I don't want to get it twisted. Like, he's a born try scorer, and it took some serious cojones to pull that one off and do it the way he did. So fair play to him. But I think that the rulings are going to change pretty quickly.
Oh, he's had a hell of a series, Dan Sheehan, and I loved it. I thought he saw the loophole, he took it, and he nailed it, and happy days.
We've got a comment from Mike on Instagram. He says, Ben has got to stop doing his predictions. You know, especially when it comes to Australia. I probably agree he's worked out right this time. What do you mean you were right?
My predictions was right, no? I said the Lions will win. I'd said Lions will win the series. I said Lions will win
you said
at the
you
weekend.
could not see the Australian team getting any better from last week, and the final 20 minutes was basically just because the Lions gave up. That's how I interpreted your comments last week, which I think was a little bit different to what we saw.
You'd have interpreted them absolutely spot on, Coley, because that is exactly what I said. The impact of Skelton and Valentini was colossal. Those guys were absolutely huge. And, they didn't allow the Lions to settle. The first 30 minutes was very, very impressive from the Australians. And the Lions, discipline, sort of almost allowed them to keep, getting entries and everything like that. I thought Tom Liner and Gordon were very, very impressive. I thought they were chalk and cheese compared to what we saw in Brisbane. So I thought the whole Australian team stepped up, and they stepped up way beyond what I thought they could. And I'm glad they did, because we were treated to a hell of a game. So I won't stop my predictions, because that's that's how I saw it. But I was very, very pleased to be proven wrong, because it made for one hell of a test match.
Lenny, do you know who I think was unbelievable for Australia?
Go on.
The other Len, Ikitau. I know that he had obviously had a role to play in a couple of the tries from a defensive standpoint, but I thought he was different level for Australia. With all the razzmatazz and all the hype surrounding Suaalii, I thought Ikitau was him and Tom Wright, I thought, were their best backs. Every time they got the ball, they either go forward every time or made line breaks. I thought those two were seriously different from the week before. Tom Wright the week before didn't have any influence on the game, I don't think. Whereas this week, he was, every time he got it, he looked threatening. And the same with Ikitau. It just looked like he was up for it differently.
Yeah, he was very good. And as was Joseph Suaalii, we saw more of both of them. As you say, and I think, when you've got a young 10 in Tom Liner, you need your 12 to take some of that pressure off you. And as you mentioned there, Ant, I think in attack, and certainly the shape and some of the little plays, when you look at the Tom Wright try, it goes, say, up the touchline, hits line, and tight little pass to McWright. You've got a forward coming on the short ball of McWright, who then pulls it right at the back to Ikitau, who's just perfectly positioned just behind Wright, and he just tips the ball on nicely to Joseph Suaalii. So without his organisation, he's probably talking to Tom Liner, telling him the shape of hitting McWright. He's then telling McWright to, probably stay square, hold your feet, pull it back. I'm in behind now. So then he pulls it back. He's then telling probably Joseph Suaalii outside him, control your feet, stay close to me. And all these comms is happening. As I say, and people think they've got time. These comms and the vision to see it and execute, we're talking seconds here to get the comms out, to see the vision, and then the skill to execute. Because again, you look at that Tom Wright try, and the try doesn't happen without Len Ikitau. But for those that see it, all he does is pass one ball. But that's not all he's done. He's given the organisation the shape. He's tucked in behind so the defender can't shoot out the back and get him. He's catch and pass delivery. There again, it's just, I want to really applaud all these sort of little bits of shapes and plays, because don't take them for granted. There's so much skill involved in just doing the basics of the game.
Suaalii and Ikitau, you saw him yesterday, they're carrying off 9, they're carrying off 10, but so they sort of they're running into car crashes making yards, but they've also the ability to operate in space, you saw for the try where Suaalii goes 40 metres up the middle. It's kind of they've got that ability to not a lot of centres, I think, can carry into brick wall. It's almost like you can carry into a brick wall or run in space, whereas those guys have got the ability to do both, which I think makes them, we definitely saw more utilised by Australia this second test than we did in the first, and that was probably one of the frustrations. The first is knowing how good those guys are and just not seeing it.
Completely agree.
I think Australian rugby as a whole should be hugely encouraged by the performance yesterday, and then it almost, game 3 becomes a bit more pressure for them. Do you know what I mean? As in a weird way, because they played so well in the second test that you almost need to show it again this one. And, the World Cup a couple of years away. And if they continue to build on the back of what we saw at the weekend, and then they play really well in the third test again, then actually the build towards 27, there is scope for this team to be extremely competitive come 27 World Cup. Coley, what was the reaction from the papers? We obviously read it out last week. What were they saying after the game this week?
The Australian says, mocked by UK press, Wallabies must move on or risk humiliation. And the Australian Guardian says, no funeral for the Wallabies and rugby in Australia this is a new beginning, which is quite interesting. I think it's a brilliant game, but it needs to be put, for me, in the context of, like, it can't be a one-off. Like, you play in front of 90,000 at MCG, your back's against the wall. Like, yes, Australia played really well, but a good side plays well all the time and has that fight and effort all the time. And it shouldn't, it's not just playing at home. It's when you go away. The champion should be really interesting. I think Australia, have got some fantastic players. As we've mentioned, and they came through, but I say you're so reliant upon, it was yesterday, on the sort of emotional energy of, like, Skelton and the Valentini, that it'll be interesting to see whether Australia can build maybe without them and not be so reliant upon them, because they're obviously not the youngest blokes in the world, or Skelton's not. So, you know what I mean? It'd be interesting. Australia, I think you just hope Australia kick on and it's kind of that consistency returns, because they have Australia. When Australia are good, it's great for the world game. I think Australia, that perfect balance between, like, the Kiwis and the South African, like, power, and the Kiwi sort of, like, natural ability to play rugby. The Australians have always been, like, technically quite smart, tough forwards, and it's like, if they're a great balance between those two, and when they're good, I think it's good for the global game in general.
And that's why I feel like, Coley, like you say, almost third test it feels like so important for them, because there'd have been so many proud Aussies, I'm sure, watching that performance, that you then want to, like, get behind it again. So it's almost like we need to see that same level. And what was it? How did the Aussies feel after? Like, do you reckon people have been inspired by them out there?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially when you factor in that game was played in an area where rugby union is really not popular. Like, they've got Melbourne Storm, the rugby league team, who are ridiculously successful. And then they've got the AFL, which is, I was at a game on Thursday night, like I said, and there's like 10 teams just in Melbourne. So rugby union is definitely the third or fourth sport down there. So I think even from just like a local perspective, to have a game like that there, I think it definitely helps to invigorate a nation and kind of get behind a sport that they might not be so familiar with, which I think is kind of, that what the Lions, not what the Lions is about, but I think that what Australia would have wanted to get out of this series from a broader perspective, taking rugby aside, is to try and inspire people to take up this game, because that's what everyone's saying. The game's dying over there, this, that, and the other, all these different sports. And I think that performance has definitely gone some way to do that. But Coley is absolutely right. You've got to continue to take the next steps. And I think that, kind of caveating my point, but I think if they lose 3-0 next week, I think it does the opposite, because you cannot get whitewashed in your home country, but be the only team in the professional era to get whitewashed. I think that actually harms the success of this tour more than anything. So from an Australian perspective, that is. So I think that there'll definitely be a lot of pressure on them for sure. And it's a weird balance, I'm trying to think of it from like a mental perspective. Australian, like, is it a shot to nothing from a player's perspective, because they're not worried about the wider influence of the game necessarily and all that stuff. So I can't make my mind up, to be honest with you, whether they're going to feel super pressured in this game or they're going to feel free. But I know that the head honchos will definitely be absolutely behind the team to try and get this to 2-1 and not be that first team, because I think that could be treacherous territories.
And I tell you what, Tone, I know for a fact that the Lions will be trying to go for the 3-0. Like 100%. Andy Farrell, what will he be thinking this week? Like, he will be, like, given his rugby league background and playing against Australia and all that rivalry anyway, I know for a fact how he sees that sort of Australian mindset, and having played against them for years in the rugby league format and everything like that, mate, like, there's no way the Lions aren't after a 3-0. There's no way that they're like taking the foot off the gas. Yes, they'd have partied. Yes, they'd have celebrated. But I'm telling you now, mate, when they left the shores, they'd have been after 3-0. And now they've got the opportunity to do it. Like, they will be chasing it this week in a big time.
Nah, mate, that guy is ruthless. Like, he does not feel any sympathy for anyone on the rugby field. Like, he wants 3-0, 100,000%. There's talk on the, Twitter or X and stuff like that about, do they rotate players or give them a run? Impossible. impossible. This is an opportunity to do something that's not been done before. Faz is going to go for the jugular and try and bury this Australian team without a shadow of a doubt, and do it in style.
Yeah, I know for a fact, like I say, I know for a fact of where he sees, like, how he views Australians, having been coached by him and when he previewed games and when we played against him. He is elite top level coach and he's after the 3-0. And as you say, people will be talking, change. He might make some changes, but it won't be because, I want to just give him a run out. It'll be because, maybe that player is like emotionally and physically spent, but this guy needs to come in because he's fresher and he's sort of ready for it. But not because, you're going in because you deserve a go. It's, no, you're going in to go and help us win 3-0.
It will be interesting on, like, as Tone touched on, like the psychology of both teams. Like, you think about, say, Australia, is you've thrown the kitchen sink at the Lions. You're playing for 90,000 people. It's the biggest thing in Australian rugby in ages, and you've lost. And it's kind of like, was that our chance? And then there's going to be an emotional come down because, there's going to be an emotional come down, isn't there? Like, you play in those big games, you lose. Whether you win or lose, an emotional come down. I'd be interested to see how they respond and how they pick themselves up, because it almost felt like they had to win that game. And then, do you then look at, say, is your motivation to spoil Lions party? Is it to build again? Is it to sort of aim for the rugby championship? You know what I mean? Or is it just we've got a good thing going, keep it going? And then secondly, with the Lions, as you say, I'm sure before they left the shores, they'd have gone, we're going 3-0. Our aim is 3-0. We want to win 3-0. That's the aim. It will be unsuccessful if we don't win 3-0. And then, like, but you've won the series and you've won it in such a dramatic fashion. Like, if they just won 40-0 yesterday, you're probably like, right, let's go get them, 3-0. Whereas because you win it last play of the game, again, there's going to be that emotion high. You probably go out celebrating for 2-3 days. The Lions might not train traditionally to, like, the Wednesday or of this test week. So there's going to be a natural shift. And it'll be interesting to see how much is a player you're probably not going to prepare for this third test. Well, you might, as a player, you will prepare for a third test, but that's the whole vibe in camp, because the pressure's on the second test. You know what I mean? You're going to train like a test week in regards to, we train this time, professional, hard, go at it. And it's like, be interesting, the training session in that final test week and how, because it's going to differ. And you probably say the intensity will be slightly less or the volume and the loads will be slightly less. So, like, and then you probably find out at the weekend, like, who the test match animals are, who are the guys that can, even on a short week, turn up and won it. And that's the reason why a lot of these guys are on tour, because they are test match animals. And similarly, so it's going to be an interesting, a totally different dynamic to test 2. And it'd be interesting to see how teams, you'll learn a lot about the teams, their mentality of how they're coached and all that kind of stuff in test 3 and how they go about their business and their desires to win and prove points and stuff.
I'm just trying to remember back to a game that all three of us played in 2016 in Australia, that last test in Sydney when we were 2-0 up. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I can remember that start of that game being just quite flat across both teams. And, we were obviously buzzing for the 3-0, but we were on the back of beating them in Melbourne, and, some boys went out, some boys didn't. Looking at you, Coley, pretty sure you didn't go out. So I'm just thinking back to that, and I think that I felt in that game that both teams were relatively flat, and it was almost like feel your way into it. Whereas the 2 games before that, it was like you're ripping in from the start and everything's to play for. So I don't know if that's anything to go by. It's just, that's the only thing I can relate to be fair.
3-0 is historic though, isn't it? Like, you are in the history books anyway as a series winner, but to 3-0 them is like part of a real niche group. And then I look at, like, Andy Farrell, and he was obviously assistant coach for the Lions in 2013 when we went, and then 2017 assistant coach again. And he's got all the experience of what, like, that third week will look like anyway. Obviously coaching as well in World Cups and things like that. So I feel like he's got the caliber and the understanding and been there, done it, to understand what he needs to do this week to get the team right. I do. I agree, Tone. When you're 2-0 up, your psyche changes slightly. But I think when you're on the cusp of creating history and being, and being part of that niche group, like, that's enough sort of to like, come Tuesday when they maybe first start talking about the game again, like, right, laser focus now, this is what we're doing, like, one big push. And as I say, maybe a few fresh bodies because they're going to add, not because I just want to give them a go. It'll be really interesting, but I think he's got such the caliber and been there, done it, seen sort of various different tours and different experiences to know exactly what he needs to get right this week.
If the week's gone by and speaking to the guys who have done a few before that is anything to go by, I think that this tour has been a fair bit more sensible than one's gone previously. So if you take that into consideration, they're probably going to have a few drinks today, obviously last night, and then they'll be back to business Monday, Tuesday. And as you guys know, there's not many things that piss coaches off more than guys who can't go out and then back it up. Can't go out, have a few drinks and then back it up training. And no one wants to be that guy who pulls up with a tight hammy on Monday or Tuesday and lets the team down because you've enjoyed yourself too much. So there'll be a bit of pressure on the boys, definitely, to make sure that they still prepare as well as they can. And like Lenny said, be part of a group that is done something that hasn't been done in the professional era. And
that's also where your leadership group comes in, doesn't it, Ant? That's where your leadership group kind of grab hold of the team this week and just, like you say, make sure, because some lads, once team selection's done, some lads' tours are done, they know then they're definitely not involved. Like how you manage those guys, how you manage and make sure you're still all steering towards the same thing. So it's a big week, but it's a great week. One player that probably does need to get managed this week is Tom Curry, given his hip situation, he's still only 27 years of age. It's actually mental, isn't it? But there's someone there that probably needs a bit of managing this week. He's literally wrist is strapped up to the hills. He's had his hip, didn't he? So there is certain positions in certain bodies where you're looking at and go, he probably is pretty banged up.
Yeah, but then, if you ask him, if we were in his shoes and they asked us, do you want to go again? You want to be part of that group that's on the pitch that does the 3-0, don't you? And so taking that away from someone is an equally tough decision. So I don't know, mate. It's going to be so interesting to see how it's managed. But he has been a joke. There was one moment in that game where I was like, this guy's operating differently. I think it was where Australia made a break down the right, and then Fraser McWright cuts back in field, passes to Suoliti, and out of nowhere, Tom Curry smokes him, forces a knock on. At that point of the game, I'm pretty sure if Australia had scored, for me anyway, likely game over. I'm pretty sure that's 50 odd minutes into the game. So for him to still be going through all of that, carrying that hip, carrying that wrist, putting in performances like he is, he's definitely, like you said, up there with, player of the series, undoubtedly. And you add in all the stuff with the social media and all that questioning of his selection before the first test. I'm rooting for him because he's been on fire.
That was definitely a try saver. I know that they had sort of a pass to go because Lenny Cattell sort of on Suoli's shoulder, but he's got Jorgensen, I think, on the left edge there, I think it is. But he's looking for the ball over top, mate. That goes to hand, mate. I'm telling you now, Australia are scoring. That was a hell of a cover tackle.
I think the thing with Curry is yes, in an ideal world, he's managed like you manage him with England and you manage him with Sale and the Lions because he's such a brilliant player. And yes, he's 27 going on 50. And the fact that if he's not training, he's sleeping or he's eating because he's got a really small mouth, so it takes him 3 hours to eat like a bowl of porridge. But he's so incredible and he's so good, and you want him to be so good for such a long time. In ideal world, you're like, let's manage him, let's make sure he plays the big games. But he's not wired that way. He's wired to train hard, play hard, and he's a professional rugby player and he wants to be out there. And as you say, it's so hard to say no, you're not playing, because he's like, well, I've got 5 weeks off or I've got time off in the thing, it'll be fine, let me play me, I want to play in this historical event. And similar with England and Sale, he's such a crucial player that you almost, and the way he's wired is he wants to play and he'll want to play in every game, and you know what I mean, it's almost that balance. It was such a tough thing to do of trying to pull him back in, but at the same time not upset him to the point where he doesn't feel like he's being valued in some regards, which he always will be. And so that's the balance of what Curry brings, I think, as I say, in terms of mentality and his test match animal, and he is full on. And the same, unfortunately, these injuries are because he's a 7, he's in every collision. And I remember, I feel really bad, but one of his first training session in England, he ended up breaking his wrist because I cleared him out. But the problem was we were playing a touch game and he is full on. He's trying to jackal everything. And it's there's one point where he went to jackal it. I had to clear him out. I didn't clear him out properly, but I cleared him out and he put his hand down and next thing he's in. But it's like, mate, if you wouldn't be full on, then we wouldn't have to clear you out. We're clearing no one else out. We have to clear you out because you keep jackling in a touch game. And it's that's his mentality. And it's always been that way from probably 10 years of age, wherever it is, but he's built for 18. Everything he's done is that's where he's built, and he's built flat out, and which is what makes him the player is. And it's so hard to take that away from somebody when it's wired into their mentality. And it is to, you know, to say someone has to be managed, but then it's the Lions. Why are you going to manage him? He's got one game left this season. It's got an off season coming up. So yeah, I fully expect him to play, unless he's literally, we don't know what's on behind the scenes, but unless he cannot walk, which again, looking at Curry, sometimes he can't walk after a game, but you know what I mean? Like, it'll be probably his choice. If you're good to go, Tom, you're playing. If you're not, just nod your head and we'll take you out and sit you down for the week.
Yeah, I think if this is an England game, if in an alternate universe, if this was an England game or a Sale game, I think he gets pulled. But because it's the Lions, because it's so special, it's every 4 years, you know, I don't think they'll want to take that opportunity away from him. But you're bang on, Coley. And what just reminded me of when you spoke about his tiny mouth was he told me once that him and his brother used to get 6 plain pieces of bread with peanut butter in them for lunch every day, and he would just bang all of them dry. No water,
bagels,
milk,
mate.
Nothing. Dry.
It was bagels.
Bagels, that's it.
They used to take, like, I think it was a bag of bagels each to school, and it might have been peanut butter, it might have been nothing, and they just used to bang 5 bagels a day. And I'm like, how?
If that doesn't sum up his mentality, then I don't know what will. Also, a moment on Ellis Genge, because, you know, for everyone involved who came off the bench were terrific. But of course, we all know Genge very well, because I know people will be saying, oh, you keep talking about the English lads on here, but obviously we know him well. But Andrew Porter said after the game that he was the first to congratulate him after being picked ahead of him. He is the dad of the squad.
It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that he was the first one over there. What a man. I mean, he's probably given himself that title about being dad of the squad, to be honest with you. He's probably said it enough times to Andrew Porter that, you know, he's stuck. But, mate, what a bloke. Fair play to him, because I would have been raging if I was in his shoes, getting, you know, put on the bench after the performance he put on. And I know that there's reasons for it, this, that and the other. But ultimately, mate, when you play as well as he did, you want to play as much as you can or be on the pitch as much as you can. And rightly or wrongly, whenever you get put on the bench, it feels like you've taken a backward step. So for him to manage those emotions, be there for Andrew Porter, and then come on and do your thing again, Jesus. What more can you say? What more can summarise someone's character than that?
Genge calls himself our dad, so whether Andrew Porter's just got confused with he's the dad of the squad and he just keeps mishearing him that he calls himself our dad, and then he's just like, oh, he's the dad. But it doesn't surprise me when he shook his hand and did that, because that's the calibre of Genge. He is one of the best blokes. His leadership skills, he's always been a great people's person, Genge, like he has. I think for a lot of people on the outside, they probably look at him and think he looks fuming all the time. He is always up for a laugh. He's hilarious. He's a fantastic guy. He has empathy. He gets on with everyone. He's a great guy to be around. But it kind of, you know, going up to your opposite, the guy that you're fighting the shirt with to shake his hand is not unusual. Like, in terms of a Lions tour, in terms of most things, like, you are all in it together regardless. And sometimes you have to put your personal ambitions to one side for the benefit of the team. So you're right. And inside, he was probably thinking, I had a great game in this first test. You know, why the hell am I not, you know, in his head? But you kind of have to suppress that. And, you know, it sort of shows the cohesion and the buy-in that the Lions have got, and that what he'll always have, because he's one of the best blokes you'll ever meet.
But one advantage of being on the bench as well is you can say you're one of the 15 people in the Lions team on the field when Keenan scores that iconic try, you know what I mean? And that's, again, yes, you want to start the game and stuff, but ultimately there's not many people in the world can be in that position, is there? So, you know what I mean? You sort of, I think at first when you're not picked, you're like, not filthy, but you got a job to do. But over time, again, it's kind of like you realise that it's more important to be involved and have that moment than it is starting, benching, whatever. You know what I mean? It all becomes the same eventually after time.
Coley, can I just pick up on something you've said there? So do you think that, for example, Andrew Porter sitting on the bench, you think Genji's got one up on him for being on the field when that happened, as opposed to watching?
No, I don't think he's got one up at him. I don't think he's got one up at him. But what I'm saying is,
right, okay,
in 10 years' time, right? When you're disappointed about being on the bench or starting in a test match, whatever it is, like, give it time. no one really cares if you've been, even the guys who aren't involved in the series are like, you're part of a Lions winning series. Like, you know what I mean?
True.
No one, eventually in time, no one really cares. Like, oh, he came off in the 53rd minute. And it's like, for Genge, it's like, yes, you're upset about not starting, but actually, you're off the, you know what I mean? You're on the field for that iconic moment. And that's what everyone dreams about doing. You know what I mean? So it's not about Paul versus Genge. I'm just saying, like, actually, you can look at it in two ways. You look at, I didn't start, or you look at the fact that I'm on the field and we've just one of the most iconic moments in Lions history, you could say, I was there for.
The front row is a unbelievable luxury for the Lions, isn't it, with those guys? But Ant, look, we've been avoiding this question all episode. How was Saturday night? Did you party with the Lions? Did you lose the plot? What happened?
I definitely lost the plot. I didn't party with the Lions, no. I would have loved to, but I probably wasn't in the state.
They partied with you?
They weren't in the corner of the R&B club, no, my friend, they weren't. No, mate, I just think that those moments are so sacred as a team, and I genuinely mean this. You know, they're the ones who have been together for 8 weeks. You can't be that guy going in there and trying to party with them and, yeah, I was one of these 4 years ago, mate. Keep it moving, bro. Like, do you know what I mean? I just felt like I wanted to leave those boys to it. You saw them create a circle, you know, on the pitch after the game. They wanted each other's company, and that's what the Lions is about. And I think that it's the right thing is to leave those boys to it, let them enjoy themselves with the group that done it. And I had a great time. I was probably 8 gin and tonics deep by final whistle anyway, so it was all good.
The photo, for people that haven't seen it, it's a photo of the Lions in a circle on chairs in the middle of the MCG, all sharing a beer together. And I tell you what, that is your unique best bit, because for that short period where you all share a beer together, there's no distractions. You got no family members there. You got no coaches. You got no medics asking for this. You got no like, oh, can you just need to do that? How's you? It's just you and the boys enjoying probably 15, 20 minutes, and maybe even longer. Like, all the media's done. Like, no one's here and there, here, there, everywhere. It's just that group in a circle enjoying a beer together, like taking in the magnitude of what they've achieved. And it's just, I saw that picture. I just thought, that's awesome. So glad they did that, because that's wicked, because it doesn't always happen. You know, people like maybe not understand, like, you know, when a game's finished, you've got media, you've got physios, you've got drugs testers, so actually to get the group together is very, very hard. And then once everyone's showered, you know, family members want to see you, so and so wants to see you, you might have to go do something for a sponsor. Like, you're here, there, everywhere. So when I saw that picture, I thought, how good's that group together, enjoying it, taking it all in, and rightly so. It was awesome.
And what people also forget, Len, is that team will never, ever, ever be together again. Like, even next week, it's going to be a different team. And I think that moments like that, you need to spend with the people that have been there through all the rough stuff. And you're right, mate. I thought it was a brilliant picture and a brilliant embodiment of what the Lions is about. And yeah, fair play to them.
I want to know, you said you respectfully kept your distance from the test team or the Lions squad. There must be some former Lions that have definitely gate crashed that party, and we need to know. I'm going to start texting some of the lads. I'm going to find out who miraculously like turned up. Just be like, oh, hello, remember me? Played 24 years ago. Here I am.
I'm trying to think who a good candidate for that would be. Who wouldn't I have been surprised would have gone? Ken Owens would have probably been there. Cannonball Ken would have been front row.
He's presenting the trophy next week, isn't he?
Exactly. Yeah, in Welsh as he does.
There's been a few questions about the picture of Bundi Aki, because he's obviously got the sort of Tongan or heritage sort of, they give you sort of like a necklace, and it's got Kit Kats coming off it and all these different bits. A lot of people say, why has he got Kit Kats on? But from my understanding, that is a South Sea Island sort of like tradition. You put it around your neck of all different sort of bits and bobs. But Tone, after 2017 Lions tour, you then travelled the islands, am I right? So you might be the best man to answer this question.
I'm unfortunately not able to answer that with accurate knowledge. However, I will do some research, and I'll ask Bundi himself via WhatsApp what that is, what it represents, and I'll feedback next week on the show.
I mean, if he wants to send in a voice tag and then we can put it in, that would be terrific.
I can ask him for a voice note. No problem.
There we go.
He might still be steaming at this point, so maybe not.
It'll be even better. What have you got on this week then, Ant? So it's the last week in Oz, leading up to third test. You mentioned last week you're going to Great Barrier Reef, but you weren't going to get in the water. What are you doing? What are you up to?
I'm actually there now, and yeah, this might be my last podcast appearance. If I'm not on next week, you know what's happened. We were in a taxi earlier, and I quizzed the driver about every possible species that can attack or kill me here, of which he pretty much answered yes to everything I asked. So it's not looking good for me, bro. He said, watch out for the spiders, watch out for the snakes. He said, don't go swimming in the harbour as soon as it gets anywhere near dark because there are crocodiles in there. I checked the shark attacks in in Australia, in the taxi as well. There was one in February. So things are not looking good, Brev.
Mate, you're just going to literally give yourself... Basically, you're going to spend the week in isolation, aren't you? You're just going to sit in your aircon room all week and refuse to go outside in fear of getting bitten, stung, eaten, like all sorts. Enjoy it, Ant. I want to hear about it, mate. Next week, you'll be back. Nothing's going to happen to you. And I want to hear that you jumped in and you went scuba diving.
Send prayers, please. I need all the protection I can get.
Well, Tone, looks like it's bedtime there. You must be knackered after your day of travel and hungover and stuff. So thanks for coming on. Or let's say, thanks for sharing with us your experience of the second test. It's been, I'm glad. I had a great time sat in my seat at home. And I say it must have been amazing to be in the stadium, as you said. So thank you very much for sharing with us.
Cheers, guys. I will see you next week, God willing.
See you next week, mate. Go well.
Thank you, Tone. Len, Lions have won a series. Another great podcast. I think we're going to be back tomorrow with a special episode.
Yes, we are. I really enjoyed that, Coley, and we are back tomorrow with another special episode. We'll see you then.
See you then. For the love of rugby.
If you want to drop us a line, get involved with our socials.
Just search for @LoveOfRugby. And if you've listened to all our episodes and need another podcast, go and find Joe Marler's Things People Do.
See you next time.